Ada fell hard onto the desert floor, her cheek scraping against stone as the wagon rolled on without her husband's family not even bothering to slow as they tossed her bundle of belongings behind them like rotting meat. "You were his mistake," her sister-in-law hissed before climbing back into the seat. "Not ours." And just like that, they vanished in a cloud of dust, leaving her broken, widowed, and alone beneath the burning New Mexico sun. She lay still for a moment, the ache in her ribs dull compared to the hollow ringing in her heart. Only a week had passed since Thomas's fever claimed him, but it might as well have been years. His death was not enough for their hate. They'd waited until the burial, until the prayers were said, then dragged her from their home with spit and scripture. "You're Apache by blood," they'd said. "You never belonged in our house." She hadn't argued. What words did a widow have against men who wore God on their sleeves and knives at their belts? Her hands trembled as she pushed herself up, brushing sand from her face. The sun was high, mocking. Buzzards circled. She limped toward the distant hills, not knowing if they held salvation or something worse. By dusk, her lips were cracked, her feet blistered raw. Still she walked, whispering names she'd buried long ago, her mother's, her grandmother's, the names they'd tried to scrub from her when she took Thomas's last name. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. Only the crunch of stone beneath her and the low growl of approaching hunger. When the first shadow shifted among the mesquite trees, she didn't flinch. If death had come, let it be quick. But instead of claws, it was a man who stepped into view. Lean, young, with war paint across one cheek and a bow strung over his back. He didn't speak at first, just stared, eyes narrowing as he took in her torn dress, her bruises, the stubborn lift of her chin. "You're not dead," he finally said. "Yet," she rasped. He studied her another long moment before offering his waterskin. She drank, slow, cautious. "Why are you out here?" he asked. "Because I was born wrong," she said. He nodded once, like he understood all too well. "Then you'll live," he said. "Wrong ones always fight harder." And with that, he turned and walked into the trees. She followed. Because sometimes, the lost only find each other in exile. Ada winced as she stepped over a cluster of jagged stone, her blistered feet barely holding under her weight, but the warrior didn't slow, didn't look back, only moved like the wind through the brush, silent and sure. "Do you have a name?" she called, voice hoarse from dust and shame. He paused briefly, eyes scanning the shadows before answering. "Chaitton," he said, "son of Red Elk." Then he walked on, expecting her to keep up, and somehow she did. By the time they reached the grove of ironwood trees, dusk had draped the land in violet shadows. He gestured for her to sit near a fire already half-built, its wood dry, perfectly arranged, as if this place had been waiting. "Why help me?" she asked as he struck flint to stone, sparks dancing like ghosts. "I saw a buzzard circling," he replied, "but I found something still breathing." She laughed then, a short, bitter sound, but it felt good to feel anything. "You live out here alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Since my village burned. Cavalry came in spring, said we were sitting on stolen land." His voice didn't break, but his hands did pause briefly as he fed the flame. "They said I was too young to die, so they left me to watch." Ada swallowed hard, her heart aching with a pain she thought she'd buried. "I was married to a white man," she confessed. "They said I'd betrayed my blood." "And did you?" Chayton asked without judgment. "No," she said. "I loved him, but they loved him only when he wasn't sick. Then I became the thing they couldn't forgive." The fire cracked between them, a quiet witness to everything unspoken. He tossed her a strip of dried meat. and she took it with trembling fingers. "Where do I go from here?" she asked. He looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to claim the dark. "Wherever you want. But if you stay the night, you earn your keep." She nodded slowly. "I can sew, I can trap. I won't be dead weight." "Good," he said. "Then sleep while you can." As Ada lay beneath the ironwood branches, wrapped in a hide blanket she hadn't earned, she listened to the crackle of fire and the rhythm of Chayton's breathing. For the first time in weeks, her body rested. But her soul? Her soul began to sharpen. Ada pulled sinew through rabbit hide with aching fingers as dawn stretched gold across the grove, her hands raw but steady, while Chaitton crouched beside the creek, sharpening his blade in silence. The quiet between them had thickened overnight. Not hostile, not cold, but dense with things neither of them had yet said. She broke it first. "You don't speak much." He didn't look up. Words cost more than most know. She considered that, watching how the light caught the edges of his scars, some clean, others jagged, none asked for. "I wasn't raised in the tribe," she said. "My mother left when I was 3, married a preacher in Tucson. I didn't know our songs, our names. I only knew I wasn't like the girls in lace." Chayton nodded slightly, still working the blade. "Blood remembers even when tongues forget." "Then why do they hate me?" she asked. "Your kind. My kind." His hand stilled, and he turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Because you make them see what they buried. You walk like 2 worlds pulled you apart, but somehow you stayed standing. That terrifies people who've only ever known one world." Ada blinked, startled by how closely his words hit the hollow inside her. "You think I'm strong?" "No," he said. "I think you're unfinished." She smiled, despite herself. "That makes 2 of us." They spent the morning side by side, him weaving traps, her preparing hides, their work slow but sure. When a hawk cried overhead, Chayton rose quickly, eyes sharp. "You hear that?" he asked. Ada listened, then caught it. A second cry, human, far off, desperate. They followed the sound through low brush until they found the boy, maybe 10 years old, his leg twisted beneath him, caught in a hunter's snare. "Help," he sobbed. "Please, they'll come back, my pa and the others. They said leave me if I slowed him down." Chayton knelt, cutting the trap clean. "You're safe now," he said, lifting the boy easily. "No one's coming for me," the child muttered, tears drying on his dirt-streaked face. "They already left." "Not everyone leaves," Ada said softly, touching his shoulder. As they walked back toward the grove, the boy nestled between them. Ada realized something had shifted, not just in the boy's fate, but in hers. This wasn't the end of her exile. It was the beginning of her becoming. "He said they were going to cleanse the valley," the boy whispered that night, curled beside the fire with a blanket around his shoulders, his voice brittle with memory. "Said it was God's work, burning out the savages and half-bloods hiding in the rocks." Chaitton sat still across from him, his jaw tightening as the boy's words poured out like ash. "They had torches, guns, and a map with red marks. Pa said we had to ride light and fast. Said anyone who slowed us wasn't chosen." Ada reached for the boy's hand, steadying his shaking fingers. "You're not what they left behind," she said. "You're what they couldn't control." He looked at her then, truly looked, and something fragile in him unclenched. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ben," he said after a long pause. "Ben Foster." Chayton stood and stepped into the trees, silent, deliberate. Ada let him go. She knew now his quiet wasn't absence. It was rage that burned too clean to shout. Later she found him sharpening arrows in the dark. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, Not just to erase, to prove no one like us belongs in the land they think they own." "So we run?" she asked. He shook his head. "We stand, but we don't do it alone." At dawn, they packed the boy's leg in a splint and left the grove behind. Chaitton led them east through narrow gullies only he seemed to know, past petroglyphs carved into stone and sacred trees wrapped in prayer cloth. "This land still remembers," he said, "and it will protect what it claims as its own." They reached a canyon by nightfall, the walls steep and wide enough to see the stars dance above. "We rest here," he said, "and tomorrow we call the old blood." Ada didn't ask what that meant. She only nodded. That night, as Ben slept curled beside her, she sat by the fire, watching Chayton trace ash into patterns on the canyon floor. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "A map," he said, "for those who've forgotten the way back." She felt the weight of it then. The past, the future, the war between names and blood. And she knew when they came, when fire and steel returned to finish what hatred had started, they would not find prey. They would find something wild, wounded, and ready. At sunrise, Chayton stood at the canyon's edge, arms outstretched, chanting in a low, steady rhythm, the sound rising like smoke from deep within his chest. Ada watched in silence, feeling the earth beneath her pulse in time with his voice, as if the land itself had been waiting to be summoned. Ben stirred beside her, eyes wide with awe. "What's he saying?" he whispered. "He's calling the ones who still remember," Ada replied, "even if the world forgot them." Hours passed. No one came, but the wind shifted. Birds stopped singing, and then, near dusk, they arrived. First a woman with white braids and a face like sun-cracked clay, then two brothers with spears carved from obsidian, then others, stepping from brush and cliff like ghosts made flesh. Old warriors, young scouts, faces marked with bloodlines the government never managed to erase. "We heard your fire," the elder woman said. "We saw what they burned. Now we stand with you." Chayton nodded once, but Ada saw his hand tighten. He was grateful, but he was afraid too. They only came when they knew death was close. "They'll be here within days," Chayton said, "with rifles and law and God on their tongues." "Let them come," the younger of the brothers said. "We've buried gods before." That night they prepared. Spears were bound, arrows fletched, pit traps dug where the canyon narrowed. Ada worked beside them, stringing lines, grinding root for healing paste, her hands no longer trembling. She was no longer the widow left to rot in the dust. She was part of something now, part of a memory sharper than steel. Ben watched everything, soaking it in, no longer the discarded boy. "If I had a bow," he said, "I'd stand too." Ada knelt beside him, pressing a carved bone pendant into his palm. "You will. But first you live. That's your stand." In the stillness before sleep, Chayton sat beside her, the firelight catching in his eyes. "You afraid?" he asked. "I was," she said, "until I found out I wasn't alone." He reached for her hand, his grip rough, warm. "We fight as one now." Ada looked out across the fire circle, at warriors painted in the old ways, at a child clinging to courage, and at the sky heavy with storm. And she knew, when the fire came, it would not consume them. It would answer them. They came with dust behind them and crosses on their saddles, 20 men in dark coats and wide-brimmed hats, their rifles clean, their smiles crooked with righteousness. At the canyon's mouth, they halted beneath a fluttering flag, its edges torn from wind and time, as their leader, a man with silver buttons and a scar down his cheek, raised a scroll and shouted, "By order of the territory, all squatters and miscegenate vagrants are to vacate this land or be removed by force." His voice echoed like a curse. Chayton stood tall at the ridge above them, unblinking. "This land belongs to no paper," he called down. "It answers only to blood and bone." The man below smirked. "Then your blood will stain it." No shot came yet. No charge, just a cold standoff beneath a sky so still it felt wrong. Ada stood beside Chayton, her bow strung tight, heart hammering with every breath. "Will they attack?" she whispered. "They already have," he said. "Now they wait to see if we'll kneel." Ben clung to the shadows near the rear, watching with wide, unblinking eyes, a knife tucked in his belt, though he wasn't meant to fight. The old woman with the white braids stepped forward, raising a staff adorned with crow feathers. "We do not kneel," she said. "Not to iron, not to ghosts." The men below laughed, sharp, mocking. Then they rode back a short distance and began to dig in, setting up tents, positioning sentries. "They'll strike at night," Chaitton muttered, "like cowards wearing law as armor." That evening the canyon filled with tension so thick even the fire burned quiet. Warriors painted their faces. Ada helped Ben wrap his leg tighter, kissed his forehead, and told him to stay hidden no matter what. "Promise me," she said, "even if you hear me scream." He nodded, eyes glassy but determined. Chayton found her at the edge of the cliff, watching the enemy's fires bloom below. "You were right," he said softly. "About what?" she asked. "Wrong ones fight harder." She turned to him, her voice steady. "Not wrong, just unclaimed." He touched her face, rough thumb tracing the scar near her temple. "Then I claim you. If we die as one." She leaned into him, not as the woman cast aside, but as the one now standing guard over fire, land, and heart. And far below, the riders sharpened their blades in the dark. It began with a scream, not from within the canyon, but from the riders' camp, sharp and sudden like a deer caught in steel. Ada jolted upright, hand to her bow, as Chayton leapt from his place near the fire and climbed the ridge with practiced ease. Shadows danced at the canyon's edge, and then came the flare of fire, a tent ablaze, men shouting, horses bucking loose into the dark. "They weren't ready," Chayton said, eyes fixed on the chaos. "Someone's striking first." Before Ada could ask who, a figure emerged from the trees near the canyon rim. One of the young scouts, face painted black, bow still raised. "We warned them," he said flatly. "They fired the first threats. We lit the first fire." From below, shots rang out, wild, panicked, echoing through the rock like thunder. A bullet struck stone near Ada's feet, and she ducked, heart pounding. "Hold the line," Chayton called. "Don't waste arrows. Let them bleed their own fear." The warriors fanned out along the canyon walls, bows notched, eyes keen. Ada knelt beside a rock outcropping, scanning for movement. She saw one rider creeping up the slope, rifle in hand, his face pale beneath his hat. She took aim, breath steady, and loosed the arrow. It struck his thigh and sent him tumbling back with a howl. "Good shot," Chayton said, appearing at her side. "You shoot like you've done it before." "I've been hunted long enough," she said. "Now I hunt back." The night burned in waves, skirmishes flaring, then fading, gunpowder stinging the air. Ada moved like breath, silent and fast, loosing arrows, pulling wounded to cover, whispering courage into ears ready to snap. And through it all, Ben watched from the shelter's edge, clutching his knife, eyes tracking every motion like a hawk. Near midnight, a lull came. The riders pulled back, retreating to their damaged camp. Cries of pain echoed down the slopes, and their fire dimmed to embers. "They'll try again," Chayton said. "Smarter, harsher." "Then so will we," Ada replied. As the warriors tended wounds and re-strung bows, Ada sat by the boy and took his hand. "You still with me?" "Always," Ben said, jaw set. "Even if I'm scared." "Good," she whispered. "Only fools fight without fear." Overhead, the stars watched in silence. Beneath them, the hollow prepared for morning and whatever came with it. They came at dawn, not with stealth, but with thunder, riders charging hard into the canyon's mouth, flames tied to their spears, voices raised in holy fury as if war was worship. Ada was already on the ridge when she saw them, her breath freezing in her throat as a fire-laced arrow struck a cedar post and lit it like dry kindling. "They want to smoke us out," Chaitton growled beside her, already moving, already shouting orders in the old tongue. The warriors answered without hesitation, forming lines at choke points, women moving children and wounded to the inner cliffs, arrows flying fast and sharp. Ben had vanished from where he'd been hiding, and Ada's panic nearly swallowed her until she saw him crouched beside the old woman with white braids, feeding her fresh shafts. "Smart boy," she breathed, loosing another arrow. The battle turned brutal quickly. A rider broke through the lower trap line, swinging his rifle like a club, screaming for Ada by name. "Widow whore! Come see the justice you deserve!" But she met him head-on, ducked his swing, drove a broken spear into his gut. He gasped, coughed blood, and fell, eyes wide with disbelief that she'd fought back. Smoke coiled through the canyon now, thick and oily. Ada's eyes stung, screams mingled with gunshots, and the earth itself felt like it might split. Then a shot rang louder than the rest, and Chaitton fell. Ada turned, heart seizing, and saw him clutching his side, blood streaming between his fingers. She ran to him, dragging him behind cover, pressing her hands to his wound. "No," she whispered. "You don't get to leave me now." He gritted his teeth. "It's not deep, just hurts like hell." His breath hitched, but he stayed conscious. "They're retreating," he said. "I can hear it." And he was right. The riders, broken and burning, began to flee. Too many dead, too many wounded, their righteous fire now smoke and shame. The remaining warriors didn't chase. They stood in silence, watching the last of their enemies vanish into daylight. Ada cradled Chayton's head in her lap, trembling with rage, relief, and something deeper. Something like love. "It's over," she said. "Not yet," he murmured, eyes closing. "Now we begin." Around them, the canyon steamed with smoke and blood, but above, the sky was clear. The land had survived. And so had they. The ash clung to everything, skin, stone, even memory, as Ada walked the canyon floor, each step careful, reverent, like she was treading through the bones of what almost was lost. Fires had been extinguished, the wounded laid in a circle where the healing songs could reach them, and Chaitton lay beneath the great stone arch, feverish but breathing, his wound cleaned and wrapped. Ada sat beside him, her fingers brushing his brow, whispering stories she didn't know she remembered. "You saved us," Ben said softly behind her, standing with soot still streaking his cheeks. "They won't come back." She looked at the boy, no longer frail, no longer abandoned. He had stood his ground, not with blade, but with bravery. "They'll always come back," she said gently. "But now so will we." In the days that followed, the survivors rebuilt, not from shame, not from fear, but from fire. New shelters rose beside the old. Songs filled the canyon again, low and steady, as if coaxing the land to trust them once more. Ben was given a place among the scouts, not for skill, but for heart. The white-haired elder gave him a necklace of carved bone and said, "Your mother never named you wrong. You were meant to carry light through smoke." Ada spent her nights by the fire, her hands busy with cloth, her thoughts deeper than ever. When Chaitton awoke fully, voice hoarse but eyes steady, she was there. You stayed, he rasped. You're not rid of me yet, she smiled. You shouldn't have taken that bullet for me. Didn't, he said. I took it for us. She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. Then I guess it's our wound to carry. In the days that followed, strangers arrived, others who'd heard the story, who'd felt the tremor of defiance ripple through the land. Widows, runaways, lost sons. They came not as beggars, but as builders, offering what they could. Ada showed them how to plant herbs near the warm stones, how to mend leather with steady hands. Chayton taught them to listen, really listen, to the rhythm of the wind and the meaning in silence. And together, they did not forget the fire. They honored it. The canyon, once a grave in waiting, had become a cradle. And Ada, once cast away, was now its beating heart. They gathered at dawn, every soul the canyon had cradled, scars visible and not, voices hushed with reverence as the wind moved gently through the cliffs like a breath too sacred to break. Ada stood at the center beside Chaitton, who leaned on a carved staff, thinner but upright, his eyes bright with something deeper than survival. This place has no name, he said, voice clear, carried on silence. It was forgotten, stolen, burned, but now it remembers. Ada stepped forward, heart full, voice steady. We were cast away, labeled cursed, left to bleed into dust, but here we built truth. She turned to Ben, now standing proudly among the scouts, the bone necklace resting at his chest. Here, a boy became brave. To the women who once feared the sound of their own footsteps. Here, we found our voices again. And finally to Chaitton, her voice softening but not trembling. And here, I found a man who gave me nothing but choice, when all I had known was chains. Chaitton took her hand, rough palm against hers, and raised it high. We are not exiles, he said. We are chosen, by each other, by the land, by the fire that refused to go out. The elder stepped forward, scattering sage and crushed stone into the circle. Then give this place its name, she said. Ada looked to the canyon walls, scorched but standing, and smiled. We call it Kutaina, she said, the place that waited. Cheers did not erupt. Instead, silence embraced them, deeper than awe, older than words, a silence of belonging. That evening they held a feast, not of wealth, but of witness. Songs were sung in 4 languages, fires danced across stone, and Ada walked barefoot across the ridge, feeling the earth press back beneath her toes like a promise. Chaitton joined her, arm around her waist, gaze on the stars. I once thought I was meant to die alone out here, he said. So did I, she replied. But we were wrong. He turned to her, smile faint. What now? Now we live, she said, and we teach others how. Below them, the canyon flickered with laughter, fire, and life reclaimed. No soldiers came, no riders dared. The wolves had long since learned the scent of strength, and they no longer circled here. In the place where the lost had once been thrown, the saved had risen, not as survivors, as sovereigns.